Organization development practitioners are people who are involved in, well, change initiatives. The goal is to change some part of, or all of an organization from an existing state to an envisioned better future state. This could be the whole organization, it might be a department, it could just be some jobs within a department, but it's moving the organization from current state to a better future state. That means that organization development has a lot to do with change, planned change. So let's talk about change, and let's use a mental model that might be particularly helpful for us to understand some of the enormous pressures and stresses that the leaders inside organizations face, particularly private sector organizations who are in competition with other companies. Now, the mental model that I want to share with you is called creative destruction. It's been around a long time. It was originally invented by an economist, kind of the term floated around, but later a really famous economist named Joseph Schumpeter got a hold of it, wrote about it, really expanded on the concept. And so, to paraphrase, it goes like this. Innovation, human beings' ability to innovate, to come up with something that's really better than whatever it was we had before, is unlimited and unstoppable. And it's a wonderful thing. And it ends up providing great benefit to society. And it's also sometimes a painful thing. I will give you a few examples. Let's go back in time. It wasn't all that long ago when everybody was walking or riding on horses. Because there weren't any automobiles, right? So you can imagine a big city like Atlanta, Georgia, or New York City. Big cities at that time were, building buildings and moving stuff, right? The big cities are evolving, but the car hasn't quite been invented yet. It's not there yet. So the industry for horses and horse-related stuff is enormous. Let's take New York City for example. There were big horse breeding industries because everybody got around on horses and wagons. There were a big industry for making those wagons and the wheels for those wagons and the reins, for the driver to guide the horses and little whips that whip the horse, move forward. Imagine all these horses. You got a manure situation. You've got to have some industry to handle all that manure. So everybody's just going along happily. And then here comes somebody and they invent a horseless carriage, a car that runs not with actual horsepower, but horsepower derived from burning fossil fuel or steam or electricity. So as the car started to take off, it was just beginning to take off. People in the horse industry probably thought, that thing will never take off. Yeah, look at that. It's a flash in the pan. Next thing you know, 10% of the people are driving cars. 15% of the people are driving cars. They take off like crazy. Henry Ford comes along and almost everybody's got a car. This is creative. This is enormously creative. A car, the automobile, imagine, you don't have to feed it, you drive, it's much cheaper to operate, it's more reliable, you can go way faster. But you might not be really happy about that if you were in, big horse manure business. You're thinking, I don't have as much horse manure to work with here. Or breeding horses and not as much demand for horses. The carts and wagons are just, nobody's buying them. It's painful, but innovation is painful. So what happens is those people who realize this phenomenon, we call it creative destruction, were smart. They said, I think I'm going to start selling some cars and some wagons and see if this thing takes off. People who resisted the change, who said, no, I'm not going to change. I'm going to do everything I can to hang on to the old. Well, they were in big trouble, and they probably didn't fare very well. So you can imagine. Here's an example. At least one of the major big wagon makers of that time switched to automobiles and got, crazy successful and ended up employing thousands and thousands of more people Well, in fact, the automobile industry, you take this example, creative destruction, right? The automobile destroyed the horse and buggy industry, all but just a tiny little bit of it over time. But it created an enormous, much larger industry, and even more than that, it enabled people to go faster and farther and be more productive, and therefore it spawned even more and more and more industries that never would have been possible without that transportation. Creative destruction. Here's another example. We used to use typewriters when I was a kid, when I was a young person. Typewriter, 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 and they were mechanical, and then they became electrical. Oh, nobody bought the mechanical ones anymore. Creative destruction. But then the electrical ones came along, and then they started putting little electronic displays, and nobody wanted just an electric. You had to have the electronic display. Creative destruction. And then somebody came along with computers, and now we keyboard, and it prints out we don't need the typewriter anymore. You can't find them. The last typewriter manufacturer on the earth closed down a few years ago. The only way to get one now is to buy an antique. Creative destruction. Creative, innovative ideas. It comes along that's so much better that it makes the last best thing obsolete. A little bit painful, but historically better and better and better. Why? Because we find better and better ways to serve society and benefit people. Another example, music. I used to listen to 8-track tapes, and then somebody came along and invented the cassette tape, and I had a bunch of obsolete 8-track tapes. I didn't like it. The people that made 8-track tapes probably didn't like it either, unless they were smart enough to start making the cassette tapes. But they better not sit on their laurels, because pretty soon somebody came along with DVD. Aha! And the DVD just decimated what was left of the tape business. But then the DVDs were really starting to take off. Innovation, creative destruction, and bam, we've got what? MP3s. And there's no end to it. There's no theoretical end to creative destruction. So final point. What keeps our customers up at night? Those leaders that we work with. One thing, if they're in the private sector, if they're in competition with others, innovation, creative destruction, it's almost like a natural law of just the way people innovate and are able to innovate and come up with things better and better. And you can run from it. If you're in business, you can run, but you can't hide from creative destruction.